So, should I start?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to talk today about promoting students' conceptual understanding. Collaborating with CTE has been fantastic for me because it actually has made me think about my practice in a much more purposeful way. And when I was thinking about this presentation, I was noticing all the things that I have already been doing, but also some other things I would like to do. So I highly recommend you becoming a faculty affiliate because it was work for me. So I'm Carla de Rosal, and I work in Simmons School of Education. I am a clinical assistant professor. That means that I mainly teach. That's where my heart is. And I had the privilege to work with CTE this fall of 2023. Please, when we communicate, feel free to let me know which are the pronouns that you want to use. I use she, her, ella. I am gladly, I'm very interested in honoring your request because it's for me fundamental to recognize diversity and offer inclusive spaces every time that I share what I know with others. And so let's begin. I am asking you for this information just because sometimes when you ask me questions, I want just to make sure that I know what is your background or your context, so I can situate myself and actually answer the question in a way that is more aligned with your needs. So you can enter this in the chat. I would really appreciate it. Also, feel free to ask me questions or post something in the chat, and I will answer them. So today I want to share some strategies of how to promote students' conceptual understandings. Mainly I'm going to talk about how you actually develop some concepts, how you map them or connect them between each other or among each other, and how you find a way to actually apply concepts in different contexts. It's super important for students, particularly in this time and an age in which facts are available via Google, to actually have a more in-depth understanding of the key concepts of different academic disciplines, and being able to apply these knowledge and skills in novel contexts. I think that actually having students develop this flexibility is super important. I think that I still have work to do on this, but I'm very pleased with what has happened right now. And I'm trying for teachers that are many times my students to bring them into the classrooms because I think we need to change the way in which we're teaching. I have experience developing conceptual understanding in different contexts. I was a K-12 classroom teacher, so I worked in pre-K and elementary, and I also work in secondary settings. And now I teach teachers that work in those spaces. That allows me to actually get to know the challenges, the demands, the needs of different content areas. So I have science teachers, math teachers, teachers teaching social studies, language arts, and so I have experience dealing with this in different contexts. My students are my best teachers, and so I am going to share my ideas, and I'm going to invite you to ask questions in the chat. Or after I finish, feel free to contact me for a reason that I still don't know. I am in a first name basis in the SMU email, so I'm Carla with a K at smu.edu, and I would love to answer your questions. I really appreciate that CTE opens these spaces in which we can learn from one another. And again, I'm just sharing, and I'm learning like all of you, and I would also appreciate if you have anything that you want to share with me that is also working in your classroom. So what is conceptual understanding? So in teaching and in education, we also always have these debates about what do we mean when we say certain terms that are becoming very trendy. And so we just to share a little bit and then talk about some strategies. It's just 3 of them, and they are kind of connected with one another. And then we can talk a little bit. I have some stuff to share today, but I hopefully want to have a space for us to share and ask questions. And feel free to post on the chat, and that would be very helpful for me. And so when I talk about the strategies, I'm going to talk about a strategy that is called categorize, name, and sort. And this is not my idea. I don't reinvent the wheel when I can. I got this actually from a practitioner, website that I actually really like because connects practice and research, and then contextualize and connect and transfer knowledge and skills. So I'm going to pay attention to these three ways in which sometimes as a process and sometimes in an independent way, you can support the students' conceptual understanding. So what is conceptual understanding? This is, well, first, what is a concept? You know, my students sometimes ask me, well, what do you mean by conceptual understanding? So a concept is just a mental construct or a set of ideas and beliefs that we have, and there are particular topics or processes, and they can be transferred to different situations. It's just like the transferability and the fact that involve a set of ideas and beliefs. And so I always ask my teachers, you know, which are some concepts that you teach? Because sometimes it's important to like go back and think, okay, which are some key ideas in my discipline or the content area that I'm teaching that are actually connected together and that are applicable in different contexts and that could be very helpful in the real world, because that's something that I always ask teachers to think about. We are so used to teach facts, and sometimes we believe that facts per se allow students to understand the world, but you know, it's important to understand which are the big ideas of your content area, to be very mindful of like bringing them back and back and back and connected them with each other. So in K-12 schools, you know, there are actually some curricula that have been designed to pay attention to these big ideas or conceptual understandings. And so they also make the point to always connect knowledge and these concepts with the real world and the different places in which this set of ideas can be applied to solve problems, to understand situations. And so this is from mathematics, and I just like eliminated the word mathematics. It's from the National Research Council. It's a publication that happened many years ago, you know, now like 23 years. It seems difficult to believe. It's called Adding Up, and it's connected to mathematics. And so it says conceptual understanding refers to an integrated and functional grasp of ideas. So here are keywords: integrated. Oh, we're coming. Okay. Students with conceptual understanding know more than isolated facts and methods. And this is very important because sometimes we think that by teaching certain approaches, we're not teaching in a simplistic way. You know, in my case, sometimes I teach strategies to teach second language acquisition, and then I'm feeling that I'm not going to the basic, to the facts, that I'm doing something else. But it's not necessarily conceptual understanding if I don't connect it with what we know about second language acquisition, which other ways to do things, with how I sense language in context, or how language develops in context. So I need, as a professor, to address the need of my students who always want like fast. Honestly, when you're a teacher, you want something that works fast and that engages students. But then for conceptual understanding, I need to connect any method to all the other ideas that are relevant. And so another important aspect of conceptual understanding is to understand why the idea is important and what is the different contexts in which this is useful. And when you think, for example, in mathematics, I have a lot of teachers that are, I don't know, teaching linear relationships. So where do you use this? And it's super important to understand what is the concept actually, like what it actually means in mathematics, to actually be able to transfer to the different content areas, or the idea of a transfer of energy in science, or the idea of author's purpose when we're thinking about reading fiction literature. So you have an integrated and functional understanding of a set of ideas. You know what they matter, where they are applied, and you have the ideas more or less organized as a whole. So there's work in developing conceptual understanding. As an instructor, the work has a lot to do with organizing how you deliver the content and being very purposeful, making connections with what students already know and what they are learning through the class, and also pushing them to think about like what are the implications in the real world. So why does this matter? Well, when I have a conceptual understanding, I tend to retain more the facts and methods because I see more of the connection, I have them organized, and when I'm missing something, I can kind of reconstruct what I don't remember. And it also helps me when I have some organization in all the ideas that I'm getting in a class, in higher education or in K-12, it's easier for me to connect new knowledge with whatever I had before because I have some organization. So I don't have clutter, I have like organized way of thinking about the discipline and about the key ideas that you're actually thinking in your class. So for conceptual understanding to happen, just in general, like, and again, I'm not lecturing on this, I'm just sharing how I learned about it and how I see it in my class. So I try always to work in developing individual concepts. I teach classes that are like very grounded in big ideas. You know, I teach an equity related class. So we talk about power, we talk about equity, we talk about race. And so we need to actually understand individual concepts, then identify connections. And that is where I keep students coming back. Okay, how does this connect with equity? How does this connect with oppression? How does this connect with race? And so what pattern do you see when you're thinking about, you know, the situation of women versus the situation of minoritized racial groups? And so I'm bringing back always for them to make these connections. And then kind of some organization of the concepts, you know, thinking about what is the connection between equity and power and privilege. And so I have them many times make pictures and actually like represent whatever are the concepts in relation with one another. How is this relevant to their context? So I try not to be too theoretical, even when I need to. I always make the connection visible, will promote for them to have an opportunity, allow for them to have an opportunity to make a connection with the classroom. So they are going to go back to be teachers. So how does power look in the classroom? How does power and privilege look in your school? Like how are different groups of students positioned in your school? What are some things that you can do? And I share for them some ways to solve problems in this context. I always in the assessment have them apply the concepts in their classroom or in their lives, particularly with these broader contexts that concepts that impact all our life, like power, privilege, intersectionality, or race, gender. I have them think about themselves and also later think about their classrooms. And then when they talk to one another, they connect these concepts to the lives of others and the concepts of others. It's super interesting to see, you know, when students like have an opportunity to discuss with another, you know, like gender and the implications that it has on their lives. It's just eye-opening for them to see, oh, wow, I've never thought about this. And so, and the same happens when we're thinking about language, which is another topic that I teach, and language use, language acquisition, and making meaning. And so when they talk among one another, between each other and or in different groups, they kind of think about how does it look in math, in science? How does it look for somebody who is an immigrant? How does it look for somebody who is a second language learner? And so this is more or less there. But this is just enough of the theory. So when I'm planning my classes, I think, okay, which are the key concepts that I want students to get to know? And then I organize them in a syllabus in a way that makes sense and represent a little bit what's happening out there. So if I feel that in my diversity class, equity and power at the center of everything that I want to teach, I start with that at the beginning, and I have students make sure that they actually grasp those concepts, and then I identify which are some connections that I want to make evident. Sometimes just knowing about concepts is not enough. It's important to understand how they are connected. That is how conceptual understanding happens. So I go back and have them connect explicitly in my class, and also in the assignments. And then I'm always thinking, okay, when I'm doing the assignment, so how do I want them to notice that there are different ways to use it? And so that is the planning part. So I'm going to the strategies because I'm taking a lot just talking about the theory. So again, this is not my idea. I was very curious just because I was noticing that in certain topics I needed to go more in depth in the understanding and more in depth promoting making connections and thinking about different contexts. And so I found this article in Edutopia, and so this is a K-12, mainly K-12 website that is funded by the George Lucas organization. I love it because it integrates like research, like the latest research in learning and in a variety of topics connected with education, and then it presents in a way that is relevant for practitioners, also people who are teaching. So this is like they bring an article from Marshall from 2019 in which the idea is categorizing concepts, naming concepts, sorting like concepts or characteristics of concept, contextualizing the concepts and connecting them with other concepts and transferring them into the context in different contexts. So how do I do it? I teach a class that is called Culture, Community, and Education. And so again, culture, community, education. So what do we mean by that? And I engage students in thinking about this. So I'm going to show you how do I categorize, name, and sort. They actually really like this, and these are adults, these are mainly graduate school students that are working as teachers. And so there are two ways in which you can go about this. So for example, in a class related to culture, I ask them to actually individually identify examples and non-examples of no, this was about community, of communities. Of communities, and so what was groups in which they participated that were examples of communities, and groups in which they participated that were non-example. And then I had them think about the attributes of these spaces. So again, this is building the context, the concepts, just making sure that the students actually come to an in-depth understanding of the concepts. So in the small groups, this is something that I do always, but I will come back. So option one, I share a concept and I say, okay, we're going to talk about community today. And in small groups, I want you to come up with your own examples and non-examples. And then we're going to meet, and I want to put a T-chart labeled, yes, this is a community, no, it's not a community, sorting the examples. And then we're going to think about the characteristics of these spaces that are communities and these spaces that are not communities. And it sounds simple, but it just really, really goes in depth, so because you can also see what the students actually think about what is a community, and you can actually address possible misconceptions, or maybe you think something about community and they think about something different. And so doing something like this actually made me see that for some students, even living in an apartment was a community, even when it wasn't for me, because I was thinking about common goals and knowing one another, and so I have a more kumbaya kind of way of thinking about community, and another group of students didn't have those ideas. But I wanted to come to a certain concept that we connected with a classroom, and I certainly didn't want the teachers to think about community as the members of their homeowners association, because that's not necessarily the kind of community that I wanted. So anyway, so independent work, and again, I always put the directions because these are open-ended tasks, the teachers are exhausted, they are many times used to lecturing, and so Carl is asking them to do something kind of new wave. So I said, okay, independently, let's illustrate what is culture, community, power, and identify 3 examples of that you're familiar with. be ready to explain what they are example, identify 3 non-examples, and then be ready to explain what they are non-examples. And then I give them time, and they like to write in post-its, and it gives a little bit of anonymity, you know. And so then I get them into small groups, and then they paste their ideas in a T-chart. I think I put it here. And so they actually take turns sharing at least one example and talking about what characterizes it. And then I invite them to identify critical characteristics of the concept. And it's really kind of going in depth, you know, because I said, okay, let's talk about privilege. Oh, wow. So what some examples of privilege? What are some non-examples? So what is the characteristic of privilege? And so you go like that in depth, and so or scaffolding for like going more in a practical way, you know, scaffolding learning or language. And so I have them write the characteristics and then come up with a definition. It's so wonderful to hear them come up with their own definitions, listening to one another. I always invite them to be like listen to others and enrich their definition. This typically is kind of an assignment. So like I have them do this work and then they are going to submit their own definition. When I read, I love to see how they many times integrate what they have heard from others, and the final definitions are actually pretty good. And so another way is in mathematics, for example, you give them multiple examples of, I don't know, linear relationships, and then possibly if it represents whatever concept in different ways. So it's very important not to always give the same examples, because then you are not really building a student's conceptual understanding, because they are going to only connect their concept with a particular like context. And so you give them the examples, and then they find the common attributes, and then they write a definition. And this is wonderful, because particularly in the hard sciences, if you show how a mathematical concept is present in different ways, you can show it in the form of a graph, or in the form of an equation, or in the form of a table. And so I learn a lot about these because I invite the teachers to think about how they will do this in their classroom. So in independent work, I give them a set of examples, and then, for example, of culture, and then identify common characteristics of the examples, and then they write what are the characteristics. Okay, these are behaviors, they are beliefs, this is visible, not visible, and so they write a definition based on the examples. And this is something that I borrowed from K-12, and this is the Freier model. So you have here, for example, culture, and then the students write in groups what is the definition, and then they find some characteristics, and then they write an example and non-examples. I really like to do this because it helps them see, you know, like the concept right there, and the examples hopefully are coming from different peers, because I also have them talk with people that sometimes think something different or different grade levels. And this is the resource that I use. I actually really like this resource. It can be used for anything. I'm just going fast to show you, because in the humanities, for example, like democracy, you can give them examples of democracies and non-democracies, and then they actually come up with characteristics, and then they define. But you can also do that with perimeter, you know, or even a sonnet in music. And so, and if you have a student working together, or you can give it like this, and, you know, feel, and then you have them come up with, which is a concept. So you can do it in different ways. So, for example, the ideas, beliefs, and ways of doing of a group, this is for sure culture or religion. And so I think it's culture. And so you have students do that. And so it's very useful for students. We are so sorry. I'm very sorry. I don't know what I did here. Yes, I know how to use technology, but I get stressed when I'm in front of faculty. Okay, so this is another way, another resource that you can use. Contextualize and connect. So now they know what is culture. Now they know, at least in the context of this space. I'm not going to claim that I use a universal definition of language. I think that depending on your content area or your discipline, your theoretical perspective is going to be different. But we come to a consensus of the concept, and then we need to contextualize the concept with and connect it with other concepts. And so it's super important to contextualize and connect concepts. This is key to conceptual understanding. It allows for generalization. The key here is offering different examples of a variety of concepts. For example, in culture, students typically just connect culture with ethnicity, but they are not thinking about culture, about classroom culture, youth culture, I don't know, culture related to religion, culture related to SMU, culture related to the sciences, okay, the culture of science. And so you need to actually make a point that students connect the concept with different concepts, contexts, and then actually have them connect this concept with other concepts. So when we're thinking about culture, how is that connected with identity? How is that connected with equity? How is that connected with schools? And so you really have students thinking. And because they do it actually in small groups, they feel more comfortable. Oh, wow, what did I do here? I didn't actually formatted this in the way I like it. So I really like these resources because it's talk about like the different ways in which we connect knowledge in the different content areas or disciplines. The Annenberg Institute is kind of wonderful. So I invite you to see, how like for different disciplines, knowledge is connected. What other one? Oh, okay. I think this one was also awesome. So when we're talking about concepts, there are going to be different relationships in the concepts. So is there a causal and effect relationship? Is it a dynamic system? Is this kind of a narrative? So this is wonderful. So for me as an instructor, just thinking about the relationship between concepts, like being an academic, it just makes me feel like super excited. And because it's presented in a way that is not like kind of me telling them, but them finding out, I think that we really enjoy, and then they talk about it, and then it's kind of very cool to see that. So some of the activities to make these connections is to have them read texts and articles or case studies that represent the concepts in different ways. So if I'm talking about culture, maybe a little excerpt of, I don't know, the culture of Google, the culture of, I don't know, Christianity or Mexican culture. So I have them see different, and then I want them to read and then see some connections. So I ask them how those culture then is connected to the individual, to the institution, how it serves the individual and the institution. And then they represent the concept in connection with the other concepts. They love to do it. I get anchor charts. They are not a cheap way to do this or a very environmentally friendly, but like even we have here boards in which you can, walls in which you can write. They have like markers, and then they make the diagrams, and they love to do it. Some of them are very artistic, others are not, but I always talk about the importance of just making a very like rich, in-depth representation, making the connections, and being able to talk about the connection. Because with conceptual understanding, talking about the connection between concepts is key. So if I talk you about equity, and then I talk about power, and then I talk about race, what is the connection between all of that? And so then students go in depth thinking about that. I also like sometimes when making connections, because some things seem very abstract or are away from the experience of some students, for example, class and poverty, I haven't watched videos. And this is super powerful. So, okay, look at the video and look at the connection of class to students' experiences. And well, then I show a video that is heartbreaking, and then students actually make the connections. Some of them have never had the lived experience of homeless students, or the students who really need the lunch that is offered in school. So that actually enables me to make the very real connection between things that are abstract, quote unquote, like class, to the classroom. Again, I share them different readings. I try to differentiate here. I have some students that are super ready, if I'm talking about power, to read about Bourdieu, like very like theoretical, deep, but others are like at a level that they need to read power in the classroom, just to start thinking about the dynamics. So I give them different choices. I have them sometimes read independently. So read the article below. I tend to get pieces because I don't have enough time in the class. I get fragments, and then I have them like look at the article or whatever is the resource. I typically use, in this case, something that is common. I give more choices when it's at home, and they come to the class ready to share. And then I have them read and start thinking about the connections. I typically have them connect to education, to schools, to your classroom, to teachers, to students. And then in small groups, I have them like make a diagram. Sometimes I don't assign them a concept. I just have them like, I want you to make a diagram of the role of power in your campus. I want to represent authority, curriculum, and so I want you to come and show me. And I'm always like very impressed. I work with many of them are like Gen Z and millennial teachers, and they actually love to really talk about the topics and share what they know. And other times I assign them like, okay, you're going to be education, public education. You are going to be the community. You're going to be students. And so I want you to argue with others. What is your connection? And they really love this. I many times have them present. They become very connected to their diagrams, mapping the concepts. I ask them questions. I bring them into thinking more about the connections. And I also invite the rest of the class to actually like ask questions. I really like that they seem to find the presentations of others like fascinating. They really like a lot more to listen to their peers than to listen to me. Mm-hmm. But I act as a facilitator and also the advocate. Okay, tell me more. So what do you think? So I actually push them into like elaborating, particularly in relation to the connections. And so here are some resources. Again, I take a lot of things from, I use concept maps. Again, sometimes they want to represent causation, sometimes they want to represent like a narrative. And so here are some of the resources. I also teach the teachers about this because I want them to go back to their classroom and actually use what Reading Rocket says about concept maps. So they actually use it with their students, and there are different ways to represent information. And so I want them to go back to their classroom and actually use different templates to represent, different relationships between concepts. This is particularly important for students who are learning English second language, because knowing like the connections between the concepts is something that sometimes we don't necessarily discuss. We teach the words, but we don't teach how they are connected to one another. And so that is important. And last but not least, I'm doing fine, so I will have some time. Last but not least is I have transferred the knowledge and skills. So we build a concept, then we connect the concept with all the related concepts. Again, at the beginning of the year, when I'm planning my syllabus, I tend to align the ideas, the big ideas, in a way that hopefully happen in the world or allow me to build on the connections. For example, if I'm teaching a class about teaching, I'm thinking, okay, first planning, and then assessment, and then delivery, and then this. And so that way it allows me to make connections between assessment, which is a concept, between instruction, which is another concept, or if I'm teaching another class about second language acquisition, I outline the concepts, and then I give them enough time to learn those key concepts. I don't know, in language acquisition, cross-linguistic connections, it's a big deal and difficult to understand. So I really invest time like on that. And then I always bring it back and connect it with whatever I'm teaching. So, and again, I'm not reinventing the wheel. This is again the same article. I really invite you to take a look. Marshall says transfer knowledge and skills. It's just, okay, I know the concept. I saw how it's connected to other concepts. And again, I am the humanities, but it could be energy. It could be homeostasis in biology. It could be, I don't know, force, balance of forces. There are always big ideas in whatever you are teaching. Yes. And identify why the concept and the connections are relevant and what are the implications of their learning. Apply their understanding of the concepts and its connections to other concepts or to a new situation. I am privileged because I have people, particularly in graduate school, that are going to actually apply concepts in different content areas. So when I'm talking about, I don't know, scaffolding language, or when I'm talking about culture, when I'm talking, they actually can make very meaningful connections with math, with science, with social studies. But I use that in my advantage. So they can actually see this concept represented in different spaces. And so how do I transfer activities? Sometimes posing a question, sometimes like promoting debate, and doesn't necessarily requires a lot of planning. I just come up with some questions that I actually many times also have myself, you know, like balancing, I don't know, inclusivity, like freedom of religion and inclusivity. So how do we do that in classrooms? And so, yes, teachers have very challenging jobs. You know, they are always coming in these situations in which their careers are very provocative. So I come up with some of the issues that they are facing in the classroom. For example, the fact that some parents don't want evolution to be taught. So, like, what do we do? Do we honor the freedom of the parent in public schools? What about the child? And so they love talking about this. And then it's very important to bring into the conversation then equity, power, public education as a concept, freedom. And so all of these different concepts come into play. Sometimes a case study to which they are not familiar, and they ask them to review or think about. Sometimes the case studies come from the students. I have a lot of novice teachers, and the other day, one teacher, she was mentioning, I teach in a context in which I am the racial minority, and I have a student from another racial group, and I don't know how to support the students to participate in the classroom in a way that I'm not being not culturally responsive. And so that is kind of a case. So we outline the situation, the concerns of the new teacher, and the things that we have been learning about equity, and then the group started to talk about it. So actually these ideas of what is my role as a teacher in regards to students in schools that are mainly addressing the needs or mirroring the culture of one group and not of other group. And so this really makes whatever we have been talking about very relevant, because here's the case of this young girl that is coming to the classroom being who she is, and there are some expectations that are different from the ones that she had at home. And how do we balance that with the fact that we do school just one way? and it's not necessarily the way of minoritized groups. And so it was a lovely conversation. And so again, I don't really need to go into finding stuff many times. I asked them, so is there a situation that you want to share with the group about this? And young teachers, and even those who have not been teachers, are always very open, talking about their experiences. And this makes everything so relevant. And then I can be just a facilitator, making sure that the connections, I am listening to them and giving feedback, inviting people to actually comment a little bit more, and always highlighting the concepts that are connected to the situation. So I said, okay, given with what we have discussed, that is the role of public education. So what is the teacher supposed to do? So how do we balance that with honoring the culture of the child? How do we honor the cultures of the children and also help them be successful in a system that still needs some changes? And so it's just super interesting. And so sometimes I also share with them like reports about, I don't know, issues of housing and segregation, reports about the result of English learners in standardized testing, the challenges that they face, the way in which we're not necessarily serving their needs. And so then they are reading together, and then they think about their practice. And so if I'm in a class of second language acquisition, we then discuss, they start saying, well, policy is not working. So what we learn about policy in bilingual and ESL education? How is that connected to politics? And so what do you think about teacher preparation? And so when they see news, in this case, when I bring readings, I typically want to be very connected to what is happening out there. So if we are talking about discussions about the use of bathrooms in Texas, if we're talking about how well or bad we did in standardized testing and the gaps that happened after COVID. So I want it to be connected, and I want them to bring the concept to the conversation. Otherwise, they want to like forget. In thinking about how to be, that applies in different content areas or contexts, I sometimes separate people depending on their content, and so they can go in depth talking about, you know, issues of second language acquisition, support for English language learners in the classroom. And so I have lower elementary teachers talking about the issues, identifying the connections with the concepts that I have shared. I don't know, like promoting literacy development in disciplinary literacy. That's an important concept in my area of expertise. So I have them talk about it, and then I mix them back again. I mix them, and then they can hear how it looks like in different concepts. Why? Because if I'm talking about disciplinary literacy, that is the literacy that happens in the content area. Teachers from lower elementary will have a different perspective from teachers in high school. In high school, disciplinary literacy is a lot more connected to the types of texts that are used. In lower elementary, like the different genres, in lower elementary is more about, you know, helping students talk like scientists or talk like historians. And so I want them to see how this same concept looks like in the different grade levels. Teachers live in silos, and sometimes it's very difficult to see what is happening in the higher grades and in the lower grades. And by discussing the presence of a particular concept, it allows them to see to the future or to think about what happens before, and it's really very helpful for their practice. I also sometimes group them depending on their experiences. And in that way, I have them talk about identity with people who comes from different backgrounds. So I make a purposeful grouping and I post it, and so they know, and because I know them, I just like have them work with other people. And so it becomes super rich for them when we're talking about identity, to hear about the experience of an immigrant student that debates between the identity at home and the identity and like the culture at home and the culture in school. And so the concept of culture comes into discussion too. In assessments, and I'm going to talk about assessment soon, I always ask questions in which I make connections within the concepts, and I always make questions about application. And I many times have them in a table so they can see them line up. And so, yeah, I was an elementary teacher, and some people probably think are like still using many elementary teacher practices, but sometimes I need just to be very purposeful, just to make emphasis on what I want students to pay attention to. They have their phones, they have an unlimited amount of information, 6 different classes in undergrad, a job and 2 classes in graduate school, and a family. And so I just make a point to highlight concept, and I go back to them because they come back to my class and I remind them, okay, remember that we're talking about assessment, planning, assessment, and instruction. And so I have students share in the whole groups. I sometimes say, okay, new teachers, what do you think about this? Okay, experienced teachers, what do you think about this? What about the math people? How does this look in mathematics? What about those of you who come from another country? How does this happens in your country? So I do that too. I sometimes also have them present as a group, as I was saying, the anchor chart, which is just a piece of paper. They write whatever are their results of how a particular concept happens in their different contexts. When they do that, they notice the similarities and differences of how like this particular idea happens in their space, and it highlights even more what characterizes a particular concept. And so that is what I have to share for today. I still I want to learn more about this. I want to be much more purposeful about the questions that I ask and making those connections more visible. And I also want to be much more purposeful, making sure that students are able to transfer to different contexts independently. Because right now they do it a lot in the classroom as groups, but in my assignments I still have the opportunity to I don't know, to have them apply this in a different context. Honestly, right now they are typically applying it to their own context, so I have an opportunity of growth there in my assessments. And so, but it just makes me very excited to think about this. So I have opportunities to grow in this. If you have any questions or comments, I'm here. Or if you want to send me an email, I can share stuff with you. If you have any ideas that are working for you, again, this is my my email, and yes, I think that is what I have for today. I'm going to go just fast to see something that I jumped because I was worried about not being able to finish. Oh, I have a question. Very good. Thank you, guys. I really like questions. Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Eric. Yes, welcome. So just something that limits us from conceptual understanding is not. Thank you very much, Maria. So guys, please send me an email, and I'm here. Anything we can share ideas, and thank you for being here. Just consider very important to consider what students know or believe. A lot of time concepts. Students have misconceptions about concepts, so that is important. Observing and visualizing concepts, as I was saying, just showing them a video, have them look at it in 2 different eyes. Offering different examples is super important. Discuss those critical ideas connected with the concept, taking my time. So I allocate a lot of time discussing the key concepts. And then I offer multiple opportunities to make connections, first individually, then with similar groups, then with groups that are different, and then on their own in their assignment. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. And yeah, take care. If you don't have any other questions, take care.